Hello, I'm Robin. Welcome to BookSpin. It's time for a book review trio. It's been a little while since I've done one of these wrap-up videos, so I'm going to talk about the last three books that I read. So let's dive in. I'm going to start off with Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This book has had a lot of hype, a lot of critical acclaim over the last few years, so I'm glad I finally got around to reading it. It's the first in a trilogy of books, the last of which came out just about a year ago, and the series recently won the Hugo Award for Best Series. So it's a good time to start getting into these books, I think. And I read this book as a buddy read with another booktuber, Billy, and he has a channel called Book Reading Billy, where he discusses fantasy as well as science fiction. And I always enjoy his videos, so I do recommend you check out his channel, and I'll link that in the description box below. So, Children of Time. It was good fun doing the buddy read. We both loved the book, I'm pleased to say, and it was the first time for us both to read this author. It was nice having someone to share my thoughts with as we progressed through the book, and we read it at a similar pace, so that helped, I think. So I think this book works very well on a number of levels. It's got a really interesting premise, some fascinating world building, an engaging plot. It spans a huge period of time, and all of these amount to a very compelling story. So I'll just briefly describe what it's about. It's set in a distant future, and humans have reached a point where we've reached the apex of our civilization and our technology. We're setting out for the stars and setting up terraformed colony planets to secure humanity's long-term future. And one of these worlds gets seeded with monkeys derived from Earth as part of an ambitious uplifting project in which an artificially constructed nanovirus is deployed that can rapidly accelerate the evolution of its host species. So the goal here is to uplift the monkeys so that they can quickly evolve into an advanced sentient race on this new Eden. But it fails pretty quickly. The monkeys don't survive, but the virus lives on, and what happens is it takes effect, it works its magic on a different species, spiders in this case. So this is all in the prologue to the story. This all happens right at the start. And then we get into the meat of the story. We move ahead a few thousand years, and human civilization has all but collapsed. Global war and devastation have made the Earth uninhabitable, and the grand imperial spacefaring projects of the past have long been abandoned. So we've got the last remnants of humanity, and they escape the Earth. They set forth on board a spaceship in search of a new home. And this is a long-term goal. Now, those ancient terraformed planets now seem like an attractive destination, particularly Kern's world, which is the planet which was seeded with the virus, because it has all the right ecological conditions for a new paradise for humanity. Except, of course, it's taken by the spiders, who are now the native sentient species there, and they have evolved into a very advanced and intelligent civilization. So we follow two story arcs throughout this book. And first we've got the narrative on with the humans on board of the ships searching for their new home. and this takes place over an epic time period, hundreds of years, during which the characters frequently take long cryogenic sleeps on their voyage. And then we've also got the other chapters which alternate with these, and these are set on Kern's world, in which we follow the evolution of the spiders over a multi-generational storyline over a similarly epic period of time. So both story arcs have strong and engaging plots and a cast of interesting characters, but for me, the spider narrative in particular is the most memorable part of this book. The evolution of spider society is immersive and believable, and Tchaikovsky manages to create a compelling vision of an uplifted species so utterly different to humans, and considers how such a civilization might develop, how their technology might advance, and how their society might operate based on their biology as spiders, as arachnids, and their relationship with their environment around them, including other species on the planet, like ants, which have a profound effect on their culture and their politics and their technology. So it's a deeply complex civilization, and a lot of thought has been put into it, and it's really fascinating and thought-provoking. So I would say this is first-rate world building. And Tchaikovsky, I think another impressive thing he does is he manages to create interesting and complex characters within the spider society, which I think is a really big, huge challenge as a writer, like to create sympathetic characters among a species which is so different to our own. But he pulls it off really well. He effectively humanizes them without anthropomorphizing them, if that makes any sense. So I think it's a really impressive piece of world building and character building. And the human characters and the starship storyline is also done very well, but it's the spiders which are the highlight for me. And I suspect that this is what I will remember most when I look back on this book on years to come. So it's strange for me to say because I hate spiders. But perhaps reading this book will encourage me to look at them in a different way. It's similar to how I felt after I read Anansi Boys by Neil Gaiman, which also features spiders in an interesting way. But yeah, this is undoubtedly one of the highlights that I've read this year. It's one of the best books I've read this year. Definitely top 3. It contains a lot of ideas and tropes which I love to read about in science fiction. Things like first contact and uplift, generation ships, terraforming, space horror, hive minds. And it's masterfully written. It's 600 pages long, but it felt perfectly paced throughout. And it's also a very thought-provoking tale that intelligently explores deep themes like the clash of civilizations, the complexities of coexistence, and the consequences of our actions. So I'm very pleased that I finally read it, and this is now one of my most prized books, especially after I met Adrian Tchaikovsky earlier this year, and I got him to sign this book. I'll show you. There you go. Lovely little spider cartoon he drew here. So yeah, 5 stars for this one, I think. Highly recommended. I'm very much looking forward to continuing the series. I would say Children of Time works perfectly well as a standalone, so you don't have to continue the series, but I'm certainly going to. I'm very curious to see where he takes it from here. So that's Children of Time. And the next book I read was one which was a random pick from the BookSpinner, and it's called, The Platypus of Doom and Other Nihilists by Arthur Byron, cover, published 1976. This is a strange one. I picked this one up at a Whatnot auction earlier in the year. I saw the title and the cover, and I thought I've got to give this book a try. It is in pretty bad condition at the minute. It's falling apart a little bit. Parts of the cover are falling off, but it's definitely a curiosity. I don't think I really enjoyed it as much as I thought I might, so it's a bit disappointing, but I'm not really sure what I was expecting, really. It's a really weird book. It's a collection of 4 novellas or novelettes, and according to Goodreads, it's a cult classic and the second in a series of 3 books called the Universe of Godlike Men. But I would have never guessed that, because these stories feel like standalone stories. As you might expect from this title, they are all absurd and humorous in tone. It's got some praise from Harlan Ellison on the cover, and a blurb that says, psycho science fiction at its funniest and most insightful. So each of these stories takes place in a distant future in which we have a godlike human protagonist. I think that's what they mean by the universe of godlike men. An immortal who faces some existential and nihilistic threat that is personified in a monstrous adversary that must be overcome. So each story is named after one of these beings. So we've got the Platypus of Doom, which is the title story, and whose occupation is spreading doom across the universe. The Armadillo of Destruction, who spreads hatred. The Aardvark of Despair, who spreads gloom and depression. And the Clam of Catastrophe, who is responsible for spreading disillusionment. So they basically function like gods or divine beings, each with their own cosmic raison d'etre for causing suffering in the world. So that's the premise. We have these 4 monstrous beings, and each story involves some kind of big struggle with one of them. And they're all very surreal stories, very unpredictable, with larger-than-life characters and absurd narratives. And like I said, I don't think I really enjoyed them that much as I thought I might. The humour didn't really work for me, and some of the writing was a bit cringy, but they were entertaining. They were quite entertaining, at least. And I was curious to see where each story was going. So I'll give you an example. I won't talk about all the stories, but let's talk about the first story. It's the title story, The Platypus of Doom. It's probably my favourite. And it's probably the only one which I can actually say I did enjoy. So it starts off with a tragic death in which the narrator's lover dies, and her soul gets sent to hell, or some version of hell, which is called the Land of Disappearing Waifs. And in order to rescue her, he has to go and seek help from the Platypus of Doom, who is the only being in the universe who has the power to send people back into the afterlife, into the spirit world. So the Platypus of Doom can grant wishes to anyone who is deemed worthy, but there's always a cost, and that cost will inevitably doom the recipient of this boon in some way. So it's a kind of be careful what you wish for scenario. So the narrator heads off to the land of the dead to rescue his beloved, with the hope of leading her to the mists of warmth, aka heaven, where they can spend eternity together. But of course, it's not going to be that simple. And what follows is an interesting little story with definite Orpheus vibes. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what to expect. There's plenty of weirdness, plenty of zany humour, plenty of bizarre characters, but don't expect any great literature. It reminds me a bit of Cosmocomics by Calvino in terms of its absurdist humour, but I don't think it's as skillfully written. And another thing it shares with Cosmocomics is it's got a recurring theme of love and sexual desire in each story. And this is where I think a lot of the writing fails, I think, because all of the women are presented as objects of male desire. And the protagonist always seems to fall in love with someone. Well, any woman he meets, pretty much. It's a different protagonist in each story. But there's always a theme in each story of love and desire. And quite often there's competition with another suitor. And whenever the thing which is, I think, kind of most awkward when reading it is whenever a female character is introduced, she's always described in like such detailed physical sort of male gaze like terms that it's really cringy to read, and it just gets kind of tiresome after a while. So it definitely detracted from the storytelling, in my opinion. Although obviously it's not a book you're meant to take seriously. But the other thing is, there just aren't any likable characters or relatable characters. They're all just idiots. So maybe that's not important for the tone of a book like this, but the stories just didn't hit the mark for me. So I am okay with weirdness in fiction. I think there's a definite place in my heart for the weird and the absurd in SF. I love things like Kurt Vonnegut and Cordwainer Smith and Unsoo Kim, but you've got to have likable characters, I think, and it's got to be done well. So, or at least a solid and engaging plot. But I don't think these stories really meet those standards. That said, there's definitely an audience out there for these. If you're the kind of person who loves Douglas Adams style humour, you might like it. But that's not really my cup of tea. So I'm going to give it 2 stars. Another thing I have to show you. This book is really a product of its time. Look at this. A cigarette ad in the middle of the book. So, yeah. The Platypus of Doom. And the last book I'm going to talk about today is Little Fuzzy by H. Beam Piper, which was published in 1962. So this is one of those books which was recommended to me in the Hidden Gems of Sci-Fi video I did earlier this year. It's quite an interesting one. It's essentially a first contact story with a classic good versus evil narrative, and it's got recurring themes of conservationism, the nature of sentience, and corporate greed. And in Little Fuzzy, this story is set on a far-off planet in a spacefaring future in which humanity has colonized numerous worlds across the galaxy. So this planet is known as Zarathustra, and it's a Class 3 planet owned by the powerful Zarathustra Company, who ruthlessly exploit the world for its resources with scant regard for its natural environment, preserving the environment. Our protagonist is a man called Jack Holloway, a sunstone operator who works in a remote part of the colony where he mines precious sunstones for a living. At the start of the novel, he makes a remarkable discovery when he befriends a cute furry little creature of a species which was previously unknown to humans, and he calls this species the Fuzzies, and that's this cute little guy on the cover of this book. So the Fuzzies are described as little humanoid beings with golden fur, and they demonstrate astonishingly intelligent behavior. So, for example, they learn things very quickly. They can create tools and weapons for hunting prey. And they're even able to speak to each other using ultrasonics. Although this isn't discovered until later on. But they are clearly intelligent, perhaps sentient, but they're also very small and defenseless compared to humans. So they are quite vulnerable. And the way these creatures are described, they also, they're definite Ewok vibes, I would say. So word quickly spreads about this new species, and it's not long before the Zarathustra Company feels threatened by them. And this is because their intelligence could officially qualify them as a sapient species. And if that were to happen, Zarathustra would be upgraded from class 3 to a class 4 protected planet. A new government would have to be set up, and the company would lose its monopoly over the planet's resources, and they could no longer exploit it. So that's the setup. It's a pretty cozy read in many ways. It's gentle, it's slow-paced, it's soft-hearted, and it's philosophical. And there's a lot of discussion over what is sentience. What does it mean to be a sentient being? And we spend a lot of time getting to know the Fuzzies. They are not just intelligent, but they are adorable in many respects. And once you treat them with kindness, they are very trusting and affectionate towards humans. But that's not to say there's no dark side to the story, because there is. And once the industrialists sort of get involved, who control the planet, they will stop at nothing to work legally to disprove the Fuzzies' sentience at all costs. And we reach a turning point in which things take a significant turn in one particularly violent episode. So there is definitely a threat out there. But, and this is the reason why I say it feels like a very cozy read, it never really feels a palpable threat. The scientists and the conservationists that want to protect the Fuzzies are incredibly competent. They're too competent. And we just know that they're always going to win the day. But the industrialists, who are the bad guys, are basically just bumbling fools. They They're unable to think strategically. They're unable to do anything right. So there's never any doubt about what the end result's going to be. And I think the story lacks dramatic tension as a result. And I think, in my opinion, this is the main flaw of this book. There's also not very much in the way of character development. Very little attempt is made to flesh out anyone's character. And this is not always a big deal for me, because you find this in a lot of classic sci-fi, short novels from this era. And you can overlook it when there are other compelling aspects to the story. But the issue for me is this book has actually got quite a large cast of characters. But because most of these characters are quite unremarkable, I found myself frequently forgetting who these people are that I was reading. I'd see a name and I'd read it before, but I couldn't remember who they are or what they were about, and I can't remember anything about them. So I don't know if maybe that's a fault with me as a reader, for not paying close attention enough. But this is not usually a problem for me when reading. So yeah, I think the lack of characterization and the lack of dramatic tension are the two main flaws of this book. But the fuzzies are at least quite memorable, and they're definitely one of the cutest species that I've ever come across in sci-fi. And I did enjoy the story overall. So it's a kind of cute, feel-good first contact story with a philosophical deep dive into the nature of sentience, and it's quite easy to read. So yeah, don't expect any labyrinthine plots or compelling character studies. So I'm going to give it 3 stars, and that completes the book review trio. So for my next trio, I'm going to read Children of Ruin, I think, which is the second book in the Children of Time series. Here it is. And I'm thinking I'll probably read another one of those Hidden Gems books. I'm thinking maybe Michael Bishop, No Enemy But Time. And I'm also going to pick a book from the BookSpinner. Right, so this is the BookSpinner as it is now. There are loads of titles in here. There are a couple which I've added since I last spun this, because I got a couple of arcs from Flame Tree Press. So let's give it a spin and see what we get. Fractal Series! The Fractal Series. This is 2 books by Alan Stroud, the first of which is called Fearless. And I'm very excited to read this, actually. I met Alan Stroud just recently, and I got him to sign the book, as you can see. I'll read the blurb for you so you get an idea of what it's about. AD 2118. Humanity has colonized the Moon, Mars, Ceres, and Europa. Captain Elissa Shan commands the Kida, a small escort and rescue ship with a crew of 25. When she picks up a distress call from the Hercules, a supply ship, 3 days out of Phobos Station, she decides to investigate. What she finds will push her, her crew, and her ship to the brink of destruction. The Hercules is drifting dead in space. But there is another ship nearby, one that is decidedly not dead. In fact, it seems all too ready and eager to destroy Kida. Under attack by an unknown enemy, and fearing treachery from her home crew, Shan will need all the skill and courage she has if she wants the Kida to survive. Lovely hardback here. Beautiful cover design. It's even got a recommendation from Adrian Tchaikovsky on the back. So, can't wait to read that. I will see you again soon, and thank you very much for watching.